Wellness. Tonight's topic is understanding medical marijuana use, part 4. We'll be talking about edibles for consistency and ease of use. Now, edibles are probably, in fact, they probably are the most popular way people like to use medical cannabis. It's easy to use, something that people can understand, and candidly, it's enjoyable. They taste good and go down easy. I do want to talk about the use of it. They can be very useful for you, and they also can have some downsides that I want to make people aware of. Not trying to scare anybody away. I just want to have safe and effective use of this particular route of administration that is, again, very popular. What we're going to be doing tonight is producing or playing a video. And what we'll do is prior to the video, I'll give you, let's see, when the video begins, what I'm going to do is give you some housekeeping issues. And then at the end of the video, we'll answer any questions you have, either that you've through the Q&A button that you hit down below, or for the pre-submitted questions that you came up with. And I do want to mention that this webinar is designed for information only. If you are or you need medical advice, please get a hold of your medical doctor, your medical marijuana doctor, or your medical marijuana professional. That being said, let's jump into the video. And as I mentioned, at the end of it, we'll be answering questions. And please feel free to ask me questions. That's what we're here for. Thank you. Welcome to Medical Marijuana and Wellness. Tonight's topic is understanding medical marijuana use, part 4. We're going to talk about edibles for consistency and ease of use. If you have any questions, hit the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'll answer any questions that you submitted prior to the webinar. Also, as a follow-up, you'll get an email that will give you a recording of the webinar, copy of the presentation, sponsor discounts, and other important information. Please check out our YouTube channel for other videos from our series. Also, check out Marijuana Aware, where you can sign up for future webinars. So let's talk about routes of administration, sometimes called methods of consumption. This is the path by which substances enter your body. Routes are usually classified by where the substance is applied or where the target action is. The basic categories for medical marijuana products are sublingual, oral, inhalation, and topical. So how do you choose the right route of administration? Consider the onset time. How long does it take before you begin feeling the effects of the product? Duration. How long can you expect for the effects of the product to last? Ease of titration. That's the ability to adjust your own dose in small amounts. And also the availability of the entourage effect. The entourage effect is a unique feature of cannabis where the individual components, the cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids are medically enhanced when taken together. Also, you may want to consider any hardware or material that you need to be able to consume the product. For example, you can compare the routes of administration based on their onset and duration. Now, onset and duration are typically a trade-off. The faster something works, the faster it will leave your body. The longer it takes for something to work, the longer it will stay in your system. The oral route of consumption includes both edibles and capsules. Both of these are consumed orally and absorbed via the digestive system. Today, we're going to talk about edibles. Find out more information about capsules or other routes of administration, bit.ly/methods of consumption. Now, edibles include gummies, cookies, brownies, and more. They're eaten, digested in the stomach, and absorbed through the intestines and processed by the liver before entering the bloodstream. Now, a special note, there are lozenges and mints, and these are formulated to absorb into the mucous membranes of the mouth. They're not eaten, they're absorbed into the mouth, just like a tincture. The average onset for an edible from a dispensary can be up to 2 hours. Typically, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for you to feel the effect, and it could take anywhere between 1 to 2 hours to feel the full effect. Wait to 2 hours before you take another one. The duration is anywhere between 4 to 10 hours, which is great if you're using it for things like helping you sleep or being able to manage pain during the day. Now, to understand the unusual onset and duration of edibles, we need to talk about what digestion does to cannabis. When THC is digested, enzymes hydroxylate part of the cannabis, adding oxygen and hydrogen molecules to the structure. That turns them into 11-hydroxy-THC, a very pharmacologically active metabolite known for sedative and also psychoactive effects. Edibles typically mean easy dosing, so please check on the packaging for the specifics, such as how much THC and CBD is in one dose. And each dose is usually measured. For example, if you have a chocolate bar, usually it's measured by 1 square of that chocolate bar. Soft edibles, like gummies and brownies, can be cut up into halves and even into quarters. Now, a bit of a word of warning. Your product may look and taste like a gummy or a brownie, but it is medicated. If you eat one, and then you eat a second because you liked it and the way it tasted, and then you eat another one, you've now triple dosed. That means you're now stuck with the effects until they wear off. The same goes if you aren't feeling the effects after about an hour and decide to eat another edible. You've just doubled your dose and you'll be stuck with that until it wears off. While there's no risk to overdose from cannabis products, it may take too much, you'll become uncomfortable. And what do we mean by uncomfortable? It means you could get paranoid, get nausea, anxiety, and even impaired mobility. To avoid accidental snacking, put the edibles package away after you take your intended dose. Drink water and stay hydrated, and if you find yourself wanting to munch, don't go for the edibles. Treat yourself to a non-medicated snack. To consume an edible, the only required materials are the product itself and a knife if you intend to split a single edible into pieces. Cannabis compounds bind well to fatty acids. This is why many edibles are sweets, like chocolates and brownies, which have a significant fat content. Our sample product is the Camino 5:1 THC and CBN Soft Chew from AYR dispensaries. I chose this particular product because it was an example of a ratioed product that's available as a chew. Now, the pros of edibles are that they offer extremely effective way to deliver the benefits of cannabis with a 35% absorption rate. They also are long-lasting, making them good for staying asleep at night or during the day to address pain and inflammation. It's easy to administer, even for beginners. They're also easy to dose, which means it's easy to titrate, and they're especially cost-effective. Because unlike something like a capsule, you can titrate without needing a new product. Edibles are used as an alternative to smoking, vaping, and other forms that may seem more intimidating or increase your health risks. The familiar appearance makes snacking very easy. That's why we emphasize that you put the product away after you take your dose and have a different snack on hand so that you won't be using the edible when you get the munchies. A frequent marijuana-aware co-host and nurse Amy Green recommends if you're medicating is 1 square of chocolate, have a non-medicated chocolate bar on hand for later. The full effects of edibles may not emerge for up to 3 hours after consuming, although an hour or 2 hours usually is the average. You'll need a plan ahead for the window of effect to take that square of chocolate more than an hour before bedtime or for a full night's sleep. Finally, edibles don't have terpenes identified on their packaging, but you really need to consult the certificate of analysis for more details. Now, we've focused our attention today on edibles that you can buy from a dispensary, but that's not your only option. There are points in favor of both dispensary-made and homemade edibles, so let's touch on a few. Products made at Florida licensed dispensaries are required to meet rigorous quality standards and also have multiple third-party lab tests done. Professionally made edibles means a better homogenization, which means consistency in the type of THC, CBD, and other cannabinoids in each of the individual doses. Each product from a dispensary is required to have a batch certificate of analysis so you can see what's in the product both from a cannabinoids and a terpene standpoint. Although it's possible to make homemade edibles with an approximate dose by using edible dosing calculators, edibles from dispensaries are far more reliable and consistent from piece to piece. On the other hand, homemade edibles give you much more control over the final product and ingredients. And what that means is you can tailor them to your taste and avoid any allergens or unwanted textures. Lots of edible recipes can be made using fairly inexpensive ingredients and tools and appliances that you already have. I make my own brownie by decarboxylating grade B flour in the oven and then mixing it into a brownie mix I get from Costco. For best results, mix in the cannabis thoroughly and consider using an infusion machine. For more information on homemade edibles, including decarboxylation tips, recipes, and dosing calculators, visit bit.ly/cookingcannabis. So we've covered the basics of edibles. It's interesting in that they work very, very well, and they are when they get absorbed into your stomach, it produces one of the most potent and basically medically helpful versions of THC, the hydroxy 11 THC, to really help you with a lot of different situations in a lot of areas. And that's why when they're lasting 4 to 10 hours, they're really great for things like sleep, and also if you have pain management during the day, or in my particular case, I'm trying to manage the inflammation. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to jump into the questions that were asked prior to the webinar. And again, I'll remind you, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button, and we'll answer those questions that are here. So let me first grab the first question. It says, I'd like more information on arthritis and edibles. And by the way, edibles work very well for arthritis. The real key to managing a particular condition like arthritis is going to be the terpenes that you're going to be using. And in this particular case, arthritis, you want to be able to look at a product that you're using, whether it's edible or non-edible, that has pinene, linalool, myrcene, and caryophyllene in it, or beta caryophyllene in it. Now, all these are very helpful. They basically are pain relieving as well as anti-inflammatories. I do want to caution you about pining because it does bring back short-term memories. So if you're suffering from PTS or PTSD, you might want to be careful about how you use that. But the rest of them, I think, can be used without any particular caveats that are there. When it comes to arthritis, what you're really trying to manage is really a lot of the joint pain, the redness, the swelling, and also the sensations of heat. And that's where these terpenes really do a great job. If you look at the certificate of analysis that you get from either the edible that you buy from the dispensary, or if in my particular case, when I make my own, I take a look at the COA that's on the cannabis that I use. I'm looking for these particular, if it's arthritis, I'd be looking for these particular cannabinoids to know that they're in there. Now, the other thing that you might want to pay attention to is, and a lot of people, when they make their homemade brownies, they use what they call RSO oil, and that is Rick Simpson oil. So rather than using a flour, what they'll do, they'll make that edible with that syringe RSO. Nurse Amy Green, who I do a lot of webinars with, actually prefers RSO oil to make her edibles. I prefer flour, but it's just a matter of your preference and what you like to do. But in both cases, both of these will retain the terpenes by the decarboxylation process that's used in producing the edibles themselves. And all I have to point out is that cannabis is very effective at managing arthritis. I've had my godmother had arthritis to the point where her hands are actually swollen, almost swollen shut. And I worked with her on getting her the right combination of both the route of administration that she liked to use, which by the way was edibles, and also the right terpene profile. And literally within 3 weeks, she was able to go back to her normal life. She was able to hold a remote control, be able to eat with a fork, and be able to do most of the functions that she normally did during the day. Like, for example, she went back to knitting. She wasn't 100% because arthritis is one of those things where you're never going to get 100% over it, but it get her to a point where she was able to manage it and get to a point where she can get her life back and she can be able to function. So I hope that really helps. Again, cannabis works very well. Pay attention to the terpene profile because that's really the key to having cannabis work for you. And again, talk to your dispensary, ask for their certificate analysis, and they'll help you quite a bit with that. And again, I would take a look at either using, when you're using for edibles, check the COA, and if you're making your own edibles, check the flour and the RSO COAs. Let's jump into the next question, which is an interesting and very good question, one we get quite a bit, and that what type or form of edible can help with sleep? And it's kind of interesting in that probably of the top 3 reasons why people use medical cannabis, one of them is sleep. And again, this goes back to using the right terpene profile that you see down here. And the terpene profile that helps with sleep is linalool, myrcene, geraniol, boreal, and terpinolene. Now, if you look on the left-hand side here, you see all the different types of routes of administration. Now, we're talking about edibles right in here, which typically take, when you first take that edible, it'll take about 15 or 20 minutes before you'll start to feel the effect. It'll take anywhere between 1.5 to 2 hours, could take as many as 3 hours for you to actually feel the full effects of that. And that's something I do we emphasized in the video, and I want to emphasize today. It's something that you have to pay attention to because if it takes an hour before it really takes effect, you don't want to be taking an edible and then 10 minutes later taking another edible. I had a situation where I was working with my mother on a situation where she needed something for her sleep and for her pain, and so we got her some edibles. My mother, who has a very low tolerance for a lot of things, after 15 minutes it didn't work, so she took another one, and of course 15 minutes later when it didn't work, she took a third one. And so I got a call from my brother about an hour later that said, Mom is feeling great. And so I don't recommend that you don't necessarily want to take triple dose what you're doing. Wait that hour, have the patience, and it'll work very, very well. For sleep, what you really want to do is take a look at about an hour to 2 hours before you're going to sleep. That's when you take their edible. And I should mention, in my particular case, I do use edibles to sleep. I do. I make my own. What my wife calls them magic brownies. And it's a very simple recipe where I take flour, decarboxylate it, and put it in a brownie mix we get from Costco. It's a Ghirardelli chocolate mix, and it works out very well. The key is being able to stir it to make sure it's even. the cannabis even throughout the whole batch and then cooking it effectively. But it works very well. So it's typically about an hour, hour and two, or hour and a half before I go to sleep. That's when I take the edible. That's when I take my brownie, and it really helps me sleep through the night because I get that 8 hours, I get that 8 to 10 hours of coverage time, which is the duration effect. In my case, it'll last about 8 hours, and it really helps me get to sleep. So what you really want to do is you really want to pay attention to, especially in the case of sleep, how long do you want to sleep? Because if you're taking something like you're using flour and you're smoking a joint, that only lasts for about 2 to 6 hours. If you take a look at tinctures, you're looking at 4 to 6 hours. So if you take something, let's say 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night because the effects have worn off. This is where edibles come into play because what you do is if you take that, for example, at 10 o'clock at night, you'll be able to wake up. It'll run all the way through 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and you'll be able to get that good night's sleep. And again, when you're using medical cannabis, you'll notice the difference when you do use it. And I hope that really helps. It's a matter of getting the right terpene profile. And again, in the case of sleep, it's a matter of, I think, using the right route of administration or edible. I think that helps quite a bit. And edible is very popular for that. One of the things you got to be also careful about is if you use an edible during the day, because it will last 4 to 10 hours. And what you want to do is know your dosing level, know the product that you're using, and be able to make sure that you can tolerate that so that if you're going to do something and function during the day, that you're able to do that in a way that you really feeling comfortable with being in public or being able to work on your own. I hope that answers a little bit about sleep. That's important, and it's cannabis again is a very effective medication for sleep. Let's jump into the next one, and that is that are edibles, gummies, or crunches okay to use after they've expected their expiration date? Well, typically you have an expiration date on a product, and a lot of people say don't use the product afterwards. You can typically use the product about three months, maybe up to a year after the expiration date. What happens with those products is they don't go bad. They won't necessarily have something in it that'll make you sick, but they will start lose their efficacy, and they could drop as much as half of their efficacy, meaning they're not as effective as they were before. So it's okay to use them, but I think that you got to understand you're going to have to use more of them, and they probably just won't be as effective. Again, cannabis is not like a lot of other things. It won't necessarily, nobody's ever died from using cannabis, but I just don't want you to get sick from it using either because, again, I don't know where some of the gummies come from. Most of the gummies I get are from cannabis, are from Florida licensed dispensaries, and they're pretty safe. Outside of that, I don't know if the ingredients that they're using would actually last past an expiration date. So you might want to ask the person that you're buying it from. Again, in a Florida licensed dispensary, you probably have 6 months to a year after the expiration date to still be able to use it. It's recommended. One of the other questions is it's recommended to make canna butter and then make your brownies using the butter, or can you use keef directly into the batter? Well, here's the you can make your canna butter, but it's not necessarily you don't necessarily need to do that. That's kind of a double step. It does, the canna butter will make the brownies a little bit smoother, potentially. Depends on how you make the canna butter. But again, you don't necessarily need to do that, but it's something that's nice to do. Now, a lot of people, you do put keef directly into the batter, just like you'd use keef when you're smoking cannabis or you're using it in some other way, like you're using it for a dryer vaporizer. You can add keef to it, and it works very, very well. I would suggest that if you're going to add something to the batter, that it is medical cannabis, that it is flour or RSO oil, and then complement it with keef. I wouldn't use keef as the main ingredient in your brownie to be able to help you with address your particular medical condition. So keef is more of a cool little add-on. Stick with RSO and stick with the medical marijuana flour. And then again, you can use keef. I use keef all the time. In fact, I do put it in my medical marijuana, my magic brownies. It's a little bit of a kicker, and it works fairly well. What are the question is good machines for making the mix consistent? Well, it's crazy. A lot of people have a machine in your house. It's called a mixer. You have your hand mixer or you have regular mixers. They work great. In our particular case, we have a hand mixer that we use, and we mix up the brownie mix that way for the consistency that's really there. Now, there are devices that you can buy, like for example, I have a magic butter machine, which is a machine to help you make tinctures as well as edibles and things like that. They are fairly pricey. They're kind of in the $100 or north of $100 range. Not necessarily something that you need, but I think a good machine I would recommend for this is really just going to be the mixer that you have in your house. either the one that you have is your hand mixer or the one that you use that's the stationary. The other thing that we do is you can just mix it real well. I mean, manually, just mix it around, just like use a little elbow grease and be able to get it done that way. That also works fairly well. My wife has made them with that. It works out very, very well. Other question they have is which products can you use for cooking with? Do you have to decarb first? Well, you don't have to decarb first. Interestingly enough, what the decarboxylation is, it's a process where you take the raw cannabis flower, the one that you buy from the store, and you put it on a cookie sheet, usually with some parchment paper, and you heat that at 100 and 240 degrees, 245 degrees for anywhere between 30 to 35 minutes, maybe even 38 minutes. And what it does is it converts the THCA into THC, the CBDA to CBD, and CBCA to CBD. Now, that then activates the CBD, THC, and CBC cannabinoids. Can you use cannabis non-decarboxylated? Well, the answer is yes. A lot of people feel and they enjoy using raw cannabis, and you can eat raw cannabis. It's healthy for you. It actually has a lot of vitamins and a lot of minerals in there. And so the answer is you don't have to decarboxylate it first, but you'll find you'll get a better effect if you decarboxylate it before you use it. So the answer is I recommend decarboxylation, although I have tried it without it and I found it very, very interesting. Just wasn't as potent, that's all. But it definitely worked very well for me. Um, do you take less of RSO edibles than the other ones? Which edibles are stronger? Well, RSO is very strong. And again, it has to also do with the fact that the flour that you're using also is, especially if it's fresh flour and just made it strong as well. The RSO edibles can be a lot stronger. I think the hardest thing about RSO, I shouldn't say the hardest thing, but the most interesting thing is because it typically comes in like a syringe and a tube, and you squeeze that out. You typically have to be very careful about how much you use. A lot of times, I'll use, for example, when I'm dosing with the flour, I have used 7 milligrams of cannabis when I actually make my flour. So I'm using quite a bit that's in that product. I have tried to use RSO. When I've used RSO, I did use a whole tube of RSO, and I did found that my brownies were probably, in fact, they were much, much stronger, probably 50% stronger than when I made it with flour. So the answer is yes, you do. I would say use less edibles. Anytime you make an edible, anytime you do anything with it, what you may want to do is you want to test it first to find out what the potency is of it, and then be able to go from there. And that goes also for flour, the edibles that you would potentially buy from the dispensary as well. Check out, test it, take a little bit and test it. The thing about edibles is please wait approximately 2 hours because every person's body is different. But that edible may kick in after an hour, maybe 2 hours. And what you don't want to do is take two of them and then get this heady feeling that just doesn't make you feel comfortable. I hope that really helps. Again, RSO is definitely stronger than flour, but you also have to pay attention to the consistency and when you mix it into the edible mix. Another question is, are Delta 8 gummies safe? Great question. Delta 8 is a very controversial subject right now. And the biggest problem that with Delta 8 is it is a legitimate and a very important cannabinoid that's in the cannabis family. It's not very, let's just say, it's not very it's not something that's widely found. Delta 8 is found in very small quantities in medical marijuana. And the biggest problem that I have found with Delta 8 is that a lot of these head shops will buy a cannabis flower that has been sprayed with an isolate. That isolate could be Delta 8. And there's a couple of problems with that. First, there's no terpenes with it. Number two is they don't necessarily have, the COAs don't necessarily match what is the product itself. And I'm not a big fan of isolates because it's too easy to take too much of those and have you feel, as you say, have you not feel well. So I would say, in answer to that question is they should be safe. Check the certificate of analysis. Be very, very, very careful about the brand of product that you buy because what you're going to find is that if you buy let's just say, a cheap Delta 8 gummy, you might get sick using that, not necessarily just from the Delta 8, but just from the ingredients that it's made by itself. There was a famous situation where people got sick in Southern California for buying edibles that come from overseas. It turns out that they didn't have a COA. Turns out that they couldn't even find the vendor when they tried to go back to find these things. They were just coming from nefarious sources. So if you have a head shop, find out if they're quality products. Only use quality products. And to be candid with you, I would not use a Delta 8 gummy. I'd stick with a regular medical marijuana gummy because if your objective is to both address your medical condition and or to get high, what you want to do is you want to use a product that's more effective at that. I think that's where a Delta 9 gummy comes into play. But again, are they safe? I'd say 50-50. You got to really check them out. I stay away from them because I just don't like the way a lot of these are made. I've done a lot of surveys through, gone visited a lot of head shops, and I have only found two that had the COAs that met my approval or my requirements. So just carpe diem. Be very careful. Be very careful in that particular area. Second question that comes in here, same kind of question is, are there any conflicts or contradictions when taken with other medications, i.e. ibuprofen, statins, blood pressure medications? Well, cannabis is distributed throughout your body through your bloodstream. Cannabis is very sensitive to heart and also blood pressure and in your bloodstream. So the answer is you have very few contradictions with medical cannabis except for blood pressure or heart medications. If you have blood pressure or heart medications, please have your doctor work carefully with your medical marijuana doctor. You can use medical cannabis if you have a heart condition. I have three very good friends that are in that situation, and I've worked with them to help get the right doctors, get the right dosing, and be able to help with their particular condition. And it works very well for their condition. But you don't want to take too much of the blood pressure medication and too much of the medical marijuana and have them conflict with each other, and that's where it comes into play. So the answer is the only conflict you'll find is with blood pressure medications. And again, talk to your doctor that is there. You can use medical cannabis, but you really want to be able to really pay attention to it. Other question is, are edibles okay to use after open heart surgery? And again, it goes back to the same answer I gave before. Have your doctor and your medical marijuana doctor work together on this. The answer is there are people that have, but I wouldn't do it unless I had their advice and make sure the medications are being, especially with open heart surgery, you have to be very, very careful and very, because it's a sensitive operation. Make sure that you have the right support for your body and that the medications are working together and not work against each other. Again, that's related to having the doctor be able to talk to your medical marijuana doctor and your medical doctor talk together. Other question that we have here is what edibles are best and how to use if sensitive to THC for increased heart rate and AFib using either vapes, oils, or flowers. There's a lot of people that are sensitive to THC. You're not uncommon to be able to do that. And sometimes, in fact, sometimes what happens is that when your body takes the THC, your heart rate does increase. And that doesn't make any difference if it's an edible, a vape, a flower, whatever there. For a period, your heart will increase and then everything will settle down. And if you have a very sensitive heart condition, that's where you have to be very, very careful. That's why you consult with your doctor that's out there. I'd say, what are the best edibles for that? It really depends on how sensitive you are to THC. And what I'm saying to that is if you're very sensitive to THC, you may want to take that, for example, that brownie, you may want to take that gummy and really cut it in half, maybe even in quarters, if you're going to be able to use it, And I would again caution you that if you have any heart conditions at all, please talk to your doctor. You can use THC, you can use gummies, but please be able to do that regulated. Now, if it does it, it's not a heart condition. If you just have, let's say you have some other kind of condition, you can use edibles, but again, be very, very careful. Take that quarter of a gummy, take that half of a gummy, wait your 2 hours, find out how it affects you before you go increasing the dosage of that. I cannot tell you how many people I know who have basically got the brownies, got the gummies. They tasted great. Ate a couple of them just because they taste so great, and of course, 2 hours later, they're feeling great. They got really a little bit more of the benefits from the edible than they really were bargaining for. You get a little heady, you can get a little anxious, that type of things, and I want to stay away from that. I like people to use cannabis and have a positive experience, and so I suggest that you go low and go slow in using medical cannabis. Other question is, how long should you take a break from THC to help your tolerance go down? Well, there's studies out of Israel that have said you should take a 4-day holiday. There's studies that came out of Canada recently that said that you should take a 5-day holiday. What my advice is this: in my particular case, for example, I cannot go. I have 7 herniated discs in my neck. If I go one day, maybe a day and a half without medical cannabis, the pain in my neck will go to a level of a 7 or an 8. I just don't have any choice of that. So I can go about a day, day and a half, and then my neck taps my shoulder and says, "If you don't do something pretty quick, you're going to know I'm here." And that's about all the tolerance I can take. So the answer to your question is the recommended length is 4 to 5 days. But based on your condition, you may want to cut that down to be able to stay in an area where it's really helping you get your life back, get you an area where you feel good. And again, in my particular case, it's only a day and a half. So I hope that answers that particular. It really is case by case. Any questions on that? Talk to your medical cannabis doctor. They'll be able to help you be able to figure that out and be able to get to the right level that's really there. Other question is, why does it take increased amounts to achieve the same level of effect? Well, a lot of that has to do with really two things. Number one, have you taken that tolerance break? I noticed that when I take a tolerance break, the cannabis, I take less of it. It's more effective. I take my tolerance breaks, by the way, every 6 to 8 weeks, and I typically take it about, like I said, usually I plan about a day, maybe a day and a half, but I'll typically take about a day to do that because that's what I know that's the limit that I can go with. Now, why do I need more of it? Because two things happen. Number one, my body does get used to it. And so as my body gets used to it, I'm able to take more medical cannabis. For example, in my case, I'm trying to relieve the inflammation in my neck and really get that inflammation down because that's what drives a lot of the pain that I get in my neck. I'm also trying to manage the pain naturally, but I think that if I just attack the pain and I don't attack the inflammation, I'm attacking the symptom but not the problem. And so that's where I need to take more of it. And especially in the case of, for example, CBD, your body does help build up your more and more CBD in your system, and it does become more effective. Now, if you do and you do use tolerance breaks effectively, and if they are working, you probably aren't going to have to increase the amount of cannabis that you're using. That's what I find interesting about this question. I found that I use less medical cannabis after my tolerance break than before. But again, every person is different. You may be different for you, but you may have a little bit more because what your body is doing is your body's getting used to the medical cannabis. It's actually being more efficient using it. And so what's happening is you will require a little bit more to be able to achieve the same effect. Um, but you shouldn't be doubling or tripling the amount of cannabis that you're using. This should be going up for maybe 10%, 20%, 40% maximum. But again, use your tolerance breaks effectively, and you'll find that your tolerance rate. I use about 80% of the cannabis I normally do after my tolerance break for the first week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. That's really there. So hopefully that answers your question. We had some great live questions that came up, so why don't we jump into those right now? And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to hit the Q&A button. So the first question is, what is the difference between hemp, THC, and CBD and cannabis? Candidly, there really isn't any difference. They are the same gene. They come from the same genus of family. There's one is one plant, one's another. One's like difference in the roses that are there. They may be a different rose, but they come from the same family, and they're both just as effective. Now, CBD, if you look at hemp-based products, they are limited to zero point 0.3 THC in the product itself. So typically, if it's a true hemp product, you'll have less of it, where in the cannabis product, you'll have more than 0.3% THC and it'll be really more effective. That's really out there. So in my case, for example, I'm trying to manage pain and I want to have more than 0.3% THC because I need to have a little bit higher concentration of THC to be able to manage that pain that I have. And I also couple it with CBD because I want that entourage effect to be able to go into effect. Entourage effect means they both work more effectively when they're together than by themselves. So it helps me address the pain and inflammation in my neck, and I hope that really helps with that particular area. But there really isn't any really difference between them. It's just that one comes from one plant, one comes from another, and then also one, because it's federally regulated at 0.3% THC, there'll be less of it. So if you're using THC for pain, I recommend using medical marijuana for that. It'll help you quite a bit. Show asked a great question. I'm curious about THC and CBD seltzers. You know, I got introduced to not just seltzers, but also just the CBD and THC spirits about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and I've fallen in love with them. I think they're great. I think the current regulations that the federal government came out with are really almost draconian, and I think they will be overturned over the next year because there's just too much. They're just too popular, and I think that you're finding too many people, too many lobbyists to like go to work on that. Although the federal law basically gets rid of them in 1 year. The way the law is set up right now, typically they'll be going out. They'll be illegal in 1 year, and we'll see exactly what happens over the next year to get this legislation reenacted or get it straightened out. But they work very effectively. They work very well. In fact, the nice part about it is a THC drink, you don't have any hangovers in the morning. It does give you the buzz that you can get from a drink. I got introduced to him by a friend of mine who bought a seltzer at one of our local liquor stores and called me up and said, "Hey, this is great. You ought to try it." And I did. I did find that they do work. We are entertaining having a webinar on CBD and THC drinks, hemp-based CBD drinks. We probably will come up with one in the near future. But I'm very positive. They really work. My suggestion is to try one. Be very careful about the amount of THC in each quantity. Typically, they measure it by a shot glass, and in certain cases, you can get 2 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. And in one case, I saw where it actually had more than that. They had almost 20 milligrams in the seltzer itself. There are some seltzers you got to be careful. They'll advertise, for example, 50 milligrams of THC. Well, what's interesting is if you look at it like it has a bottle of, like I buy a bottle of liquor that has THC in it. If I look at how many shots are in there and I add it up, it could have 50 milligrams when I add them all up if I have a big bottle of it. But I'd be very careful of anything that's advertising something that high. I'd be careful of the quality of the product itself. Let's put it that way. But I do know they're great. I'm a big fan of them. I would hate to have them go away. I can tell you that right now. And my suggestion is try one. You'll find out how they really work. My wife has fallen in love with them, and candidly, so have I. I think they work very well. Ken asked the question if have not had luck with gummies. Any recommendation? Well, Ken, I think there's really going to be three things that I'd take a look at. Again, every person is different, and every person, kind of has a preference as to what works and what doesn't work. First of all, pay attention to the quality of the gummy that you're buying. And I'm assuming that if you're buying it from a Florida-based dispensary, they typically do a good job of making sure that the quality product, they do the testing both in-house and also with third parties. So make sure you buy yourself a gummy that is quality. If you're buying just a cheap gummy at a head shops, I'd be a little bit careful about the quality of the ingredients that go in that. That's all. And that might be one of the issues. But I'd say, first of all, check the COAs, make sure that you're buying a quality gummy. The second is find out what the terpene profile is in the gummy. And I have to tell you, when you buy a THC gummy from a head shop, it's very difficult to find out the terpene profiles. They tell you the cannabinoids in the product, but they rarely will tell you the terpenes that are in the product. That's why buying a gummy that's from, for example, that's from a medical marijuana dispensary, that's a cannabis-based gummy, is usually the best way to go because you'll know exactly what the terpene profile is. The terpene profile will dictate how well this works or doesn't work for you. If you don't have the right terpene profile, you can take a gummy, but it's not really something that's addressing your particular condition. For you to get your life back, really tune the terpene profile to the condition that you have that's really out there. And I hope that helps quite a bit. On the bottom of the screen, we just Lee and Leo put something up that's very important. Go check out our YouTube channel, Marijuana Aware. So it's YouTube/Marijuana Aware. There's a lot of information out there about gummies, a lot of information out there about the quality of products, and also that'll help you with your particular condition. So I hope that helps. There's also webinars out there and videos out there that'll cover things like the terpene profiles, and it'll talk about what's right, what isn't right based on your particular condition. And that's what's important. What I suffer from, which is pain and inflammation, I need one terpene profile. My wife has a different condition, so she has a different terpene profile. So really, in one way, she can't really use my products. Let's put it that way, because it really isn't going to fully address what she's looking for. But it does help her. She has found that medical cannabis has been extremely helpful to address her particular condition. So please check out Marijuana Aware, YouTube/Marijuana Aware. Or the other thing is, please feel free to go to our YouTube, to our website, marijuanaaware.com, and give us feedback. We'd like to find out not only feedback about your particular use, but also what would you like to see in the future? Would you like a webinar on these THC drinks? We're kind of thinking about it right now, so feel free to give us your feedback. We want to be able to, we're here to be able to provide the education for people to be able to help them not only get their life back, but also be able to address their particular condition that gives them, let's just say, the freedom that they need to be able to do what they want to do. Peggy asked an interesting question. It says, if I want to make my own gummies, is there a machine that will decarb the flour and mix the ingredients for the gummy? And the answer, Peggy, is yes. I bought a magic butter machine. The name of the machine is actually Magic Butter. And I did buy that, and I've used it effectively now. I've had my machine for over 2 years. I make my own tincture, for example. Um, Tincture drops that are there. It will, if I set the temperature at a certain rate, it will decarb the flour that's there, but it does it in a way of while it's making the actual product itself, and it mixes the ingredients for the gummies. So the answer is, yeah, there's that one. There's a Levo machine. It's called Levo, and that's another machine that's extremely popular on the market. So the answer is yes, they are. They typically run uh, typically $100 or north of $100. So they're fairly expensive machines. But in the case of the Magic Butter machine, especially with Good Friday coming up, God knows what the price is going to be. You might want to take a look at getting one of these things. I found what I like about my Magic Butter machine is it's stainless steel. Not only does it do a great job of making tinctures and gummies, but also it's very easy to clean up. It's just a piece of cake to clean this thing up. So I really enjoy using it. And the answer is yes, there are a number of machines that are out there. I haven't necessarily gone shopping for a machine in a while, so there might be some newer ones that are out there. But those are the two, the Levo and the Magic Butter machine are the two that I really recommend right now. I've had friends who use them and they swear by them. So I hope that really helps answer that particular question. I don't know if there's any other questions that are coming up. I see some coming at the bottom of the screen here. Excuse me. It says, does a slow digestive system impact the timing or dosing of edibles recommend timing or dosing of edible recommended, especially before sleep? And the answer is yes. If you have a slow digestive system, this is where rather than taking an hour or 2 hours for the edible to work, it might take three. And I have seen situations where the edibles do take 3 hours to work, and you've got to be careful. So the answer is the impact is going to be it just takes longer for you to get the what I call the full effect of the can of the edible. So rather than taking 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, it may take 3 hours. But it will work. I think that's the thing that's important. The digestive system, a slow digestive system, will not stop cannabis from working. What it will do is it just will delay the time and the onset to be able to do that. And again, you may want to take a look at experiment with it a little bit. Maybe take a half a gummy, a quarter of a gummy, see how long it takes to affect, see how it affects your body. But you'll be able to you'll be able to adjust your timing if you try it a couple of times, because the only person that can tell you what's effective for you is you. A doctor really can't recommend that to you because again, if it's a slow digestive system, it's just a matter of when it gets absorbed into your body. So I hope that helps. The answer is yes, it works, but it just takes more time. Doris asked a question. It says, just a comment that some people with chronic pain, inflammation, and autoimmune disorders have slow digestions, metabolic symptoms too. And the answer is yes. Some of these conditions do cause you to have a slower digestive system. Although in the case of chronic pain, I don't know if it makes it a slower digestive system. I think it remains about the same, but I do know that there are certain conditions that do affect your metabolism, and that's what you're really managing. You're managing your metabolism and seeing how that really works. That's really out there. So the answer, that's a good comment, Doris. I think it's something that makes some sense. And again, pay attention to you and how it affects you. And then also, if you have gone through dosing, don't assume it's going to work forever. I mean, I check every 3 months, every 6 months to check out my sweet spot because it's not that it changes, it's just with different products that I try and the different terpenes that I'm really trying out. I want to find out what works and really what doesn't work. Next question is, can you combine topical lotions taken throughout the day and take edibles? Absolutely. I do. I can tell you right now. I know it works very, very effectively. I practice martial arts. I'm very active at it daily basis, and I go to the Kung Fu Temple at least 3 times a week. And so I'm trying to point out that I get a pretty good workout. And at my age, pain and anxiety is something I got to manage. I will take edibles to be able to, especially after the workouts, to be able to manage my inflammation and pain. But I'm definitely using topical lotions to be able to on my knees and my back. Welcome to being a senior citizen. So the answer is yes, you can use them together, but pay attention to the fact that you're using more cannabis. If you have a topical lotion that is a standard topical lotion, it's just going to work on the skin, and that's one thing. If you're using a transdermal, and that transdermal goes through the blood-brain barrier and goes into your system, you're now adding more THC to your system when in fact you're adding THC from the edibles. So it depends on what type of lotion you're using, whether you're using a transdermal or not. And then also, I would make sure that, again, during the day, I'd start out with a quarter, maybe a half an edible with the lotions, just to make sure that you can actually tolerate it and to know what's there. But there is no harmful effect from using lotions and using edibles. It just, you might get high and it just may feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's about it. But it is very, very effective. Like I say, I do it, I'm definitely something that I really want to pay attention to. So, do edibles interact with muscle relaxers or nerve pain medications like Flexeril or gabapentin? The answer is cannabis itself will have interactions with your body. And actually, one of the things that's interesting is typically you don't find a lot of interactions between cannabis and a lot of medications. Now, gabapentin is kind of interesting in that it does work with a number of the different receptors outside of the CB1 and CB2 receptors that CBD works with, and also some of THC works with. So the answer is there is an interaction, but it's usually not a negative interaction. What I would do is if you are taking those two medications, again, go low and go slow with your edible. Start with a quarter of an edible, start with a half an edible. They're not going to cause an interaction that's going to cause some sort of a medical emergency, but you do want to find out what that reaction is for your body because every person's body is different, and you really want to be able to tune that in. And I hope that answers that particular question. The answer is you can, but please find out what your dosing level is mixing these medications with cannabis. That's there. I recommend that for anything with any medication, not just these two that are there. So what other questions? Do we have any other questions that come up? Great. Great. Michelle says, I keep hearing you say that your doctor and your medical marijuana doctor work together. The last time I trusted a physician to let me know I take excuse me. Last time I trusted a physician to let me know I take cannabis. Cannabis, I was judged and told to stop. I do not go back to that doctor. How do you know when you can let your doctor know about before any documents before they document anything? Well, when I got in this business almost 10 years ago, I would say there were very few doctors that would work with medical cannabis patients. Today is very different. I would say three-quarters of the doctors today are more educated about medical cannabis. I just did a webinar a couple months ago to the doctors in the state of Oklahoma on teaching them about medical cannabis because doctors need to know. What you need to understand about doctors are they're not trained on medical cannabis. They're not trained on the endocannabinoid system. And so they have no idea what it is. If they don't know what it is because their license depends on your outcome, they're not going to take the risk. They're not going to risk their license by recommending medical cannabis. Now, I do have to tell you, there's a lot of doctors that have looked into it, that have gone in and began to understand the endocannabinoid system in cannabis, and they will work with you. You did the right thing by not finding the right doctor. But what I would do is if you're looking at new doctors, just ask them, tell them I take medical cannabis, and will you work with me? They'll give you a yes or a no. I know the doctor I work with is part of a group. And in that group, out of the group that's there are about 45 doctors. Only two of them will not work with medical cannabis patients. The rest of them will. But I have to tell you, that comes from being trained in this particular area. I hope that helps answer that particular question. Find a new doctor. And like I say, doctors are in the position right now where they will work with medical cannabis patients. Next question is from Evan. It says, I'm a lightweight with THC in general. Are edibles, but edibles aren't as effective with me anymore versus flower or vaping. I have never taken anything more than 20 milligrams in a sitting and don't want to overshoot the dosage. Any experience with that? Excuse me. The answer is yes, I have. My wife is very lightweight when it comes to THC, and I have a very good friend of mine who actually is the same way. And he, interestingly enough, he works as a representative for a dispensary, so it's something that he pays attention to. Um, the efficacy of the edible really depends on the quality of the edible, the terpenes, and again how you react to them. And I would suggest that you take a look at the COA. Now, if vaping and flower are working better, it tells me that cannabis does work for you. And it's a matter of just finding the right mixture of edible that's out there. For example, there's a number of edibles that you get that are straight THC. There's also edibles that are ratioed edibles. I think I showed you one when we were doing the presentation. It's a 5 to 1, which is CBD, THC to CBN in this particular case. That particular product itself is very, very effective. And again, it helps quite a bit with sleep, and that's what the CBN is all about. So look for a ratioed product. I would say if you are taking THC only products, you're probably going to have this problem because you're a lightweight. Find yourself a product that's a ratioed product. If you go to, for example, Air, or you go to other dispensaries like Cetera, you get ratioed products, ratioed edibles that can help you quite a bit. And I think that's going to be something that'll be stay away from the pure THC only edible. I think it'll help you if you go to the ratioed edible that's really out there. Other question, Ann asks, are seltzers you mentioned pre-mixed liquid? Are they found in medical marijuana dispensaries? Purchased at a local medical marijuana dispensary, pre-measured powder or mixed in water, ratio 1 to 1. Okay, so here's the deal. If you go to, I go to ABC Liquor. I live in Florida, or I go to Total Wines. They have a whole section of THC drinks. Some of them are seltzers, which are like buying a can of Coke, buying a can of Pepsi, buying a can of, and so they are pre-mixed. They're all right there. You just open the can and you drink them, and they're all set to go. They'll usually tell you whether the either they're 2, 5, or 10 milligrams per measurement per shot, and so you'll find them typically not at medical marijuana dispensaries, but you will find them at liquor stores, and that's because here in the state of Florida, in order to sell these, believe it or not, you have to have a liquor license. And most medical marijuana dispensaries don't have a liquor license. Now, it also, if to be able to sell these here in Florida, there are also have some provision. They came up with some provisions that allowed the person selling them had to also have a hemp license. And many of the medical marijuana dispensaries have a medical marijuana license, but not necessarily a hemp license. Some of them do. I know Curaleaf does, for example, and some of the others that don't. So the answer is you probably won't find them at your local medical marijuana dispensary here in Florida, although there are some that are out there. Curaleaf, for example, carries them. But other dispensaries really don't because of the licensing issues that go with that. And you typically don't have to mix anything. Now, that being said, I buy bottles just like you buy a bottle of liquor. It's like you buy a bottle of bourbon or a bottle of gin or whatever. I buy the bottles and I prefer to use it that way. I use nowadays Palmero. My favorite, I know, crazy. I use Willie's Remedy. I think Willie Nelson came up with a great product, and I mix it in the evenings just like I mix a drink, and it works that way. And so in that particular case, it's a bottle just like you buy a bottle of liquor, and I pre-mix it in whatever drinks I want to have out there. But again, that's like by buying a bottle of liquor and wanting to use it that way. In that particular case, it's not pre-mixed, but it is something that I can mix with other drinks and something that's really there. Other question is, can you take Tylenol and gummies at the same time? And the answer is yes, you can. Again, it depends on your tolerance level, but they should be very safe. You shouldn't have any negative reaction to that, and it should be something that you can really take a look at. I hope that really helps. I hope that helps. The answer is yes, it's safe to do that. I've used Tylenol, ibuprofen, and a number of other things with the gummies, and not really had a problem. And I know other people that do as well. Just again, be careful with the gummies. Make sure you're getting the right gummy. You can tolerate the gummies, and you're not taking a higher THC level in the gummies that are something that you have a tolerance level that you're trying to manage. See, I think we have one last question. Is Delta 9 safe as a gummy? Well, usually when you buy a lot of the gummies that are made, um, uh, a lot of the gummies that are made just from straight THC itself. They're using an isolate and they put the gummies out. The cheaper ones, the gummies that are cheaper and less expensive, typically are made that way. The quality gummies, like the Wana gummies or something like that, or the other one's Camino. Air makes a product called Camino. These products really use better, high quality products. They cost a little bit more, but they typically have a Delta 9 in it, but they also typically will have other cannabinoids in it, like they have a CBD, they have CBC, they have CBN in them, and they also are ratioed products. So I take a look at that. The answer is it safe? Yes, it is. But be careful of the quality of the brand and make sure whatever gummy you're buying, try to check out the COA, the certificate of analysis. That's a really important part of the equation because that's important for you to be able to know that you have a quality product that's been tested and something that's really out there. So I hope that answers that particular question that's there. We've covered a lot of material tonight. I know edibles is a really important subject. It's something that's a very popular way of using cannabis. The thing I want to wrap up is, in all sincerity, pay attention to the timing of using gummies. A lot of people will grab these gummies. They taste great. They really are good. And the biggest problem that I've seen with the gummy world is people like them. They take them without waiting that hour or 2 hours, and they can get, the negative effects of cannabis that can have you not feel comfortable, get you nauseous, have you trouble, impair your walking. If you eat 5 gummies, you could potentially have a problem. It's like smoking 5 joints. They are powerful. Pay attention to the fact that just like smoking a joint, they are powerful. And so I would say, pace yourself. It's really, really out there. So anyway, I want to wrap this up by first of all saying thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I hope we've answered a lot of your questions. And please go to marijuanaaware.com/feedback and give me the feedback of what you think of this webinar. And also tell us what you'd like to see in the future with respect to webinars. We're getting ready to plan our webinar schedule for next quarter because this is the last webinar, as you can see in our webinar series this quarter. We may or may not have a webinar in December. We're kind of discussing that right now. We're looking at potentially doing something on THC drinks, and I just thought I'd break that up. It's a hot topic we're getting a lot of questions about, and I think it's something timely for Christmas. We may or may not want to look at, but it's something to really pay attention to. But please give us the feedback that's there. And first of all, thank you very much for watching. This is important to us. It's important to the people that are using cannabis effectively. Our goal is to help you get your life back, and I hope that we've been able to do that tonight. If you're looking for a medical marijuana card, I do recommend the Medical Marijuana Treatment Clinics of Florida. That's mmtcfl.com. Not only can they help you get a medical marijuana card, they do a great job of giving you support after you get that card. They help you be able to walk you through that journey the first 6 months. And even if you've had a card for 2 or 3 years, they have a call center that can help you not only figure out the right products to use, the right terpenes to use, and the right area to use it. I recommend AIR as a medical marijuana dispensary. They do a great job. They have a quality set of products. They have quality and passionate bed tenders. They've done a great job of really providing the products that you need, as well as the certificates of analysis. That's really there. And last but not least, please check out our YouTube channel. We have a lot of information out there that can help you get your life back. And that's really the objective of why we do these particular webinars. And before I sign off, I want to thank Lee Jones and Leah Wagner. They're the moderators in the background. You don't see them on the screen, but without them, we're just not going to, without them, we just don't get this done. And they've done a great job of putting everything together and helping us this quarter. So this is the last webinar of this quarter. You'll probably see some other webinars come up. But what you're going to find on our YouTube channel is you're going to find we've been putting out a lot of reels and a lot of shorts. These are 2-minute to 5-minute videos on different subjects, and be able to really give you some quick hitting information that can help you with your medical cannabis journey. And I hope it helps you quite a bit. I want to thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for watching this quarter.